Welcome
Welcome.
to the Grow People podcast. That is Pastor Jason, and he's sitting right there.
Yeah, that's the only part of your voice that I can replicate is the welcome.
Just the welcome?
I can't go anything else.
Can't go lower.
No, I can't. I can't go lower.
How you doing? No, you just did. You just did. I'm David Stein, campus pastor at a Canton location. The purpose of the Grow People podcast is to help
Grow people.
This is the last podcast of the year.
It is. Sorry, I was about to take a drink of water there.
Take a sip. I don't think anybody heard that. Yeah, last podcast of the year is episode 53. 50, 51, and 52 have been doozies.
Oh, doozies.
Yeah.
Double doozies.
Yes. We talked
Back
about
from a Great American Cookie Company.
not familiar.
You're not familiar?
No, I don't like Great American Cookie Company.
What is wrong? I did not know this.
Yeah, you know why?
We didn't go through this in your hiring process?
No, every time that you have a birthday and somebody makes you one of those big cookies, I'm like, really? That's what you asked for?
What?
I don't mean that in a bad way.
I didn't know this.
Oh yeah, because they're soft. We've been through the soft.
Oh, that's right.
The soft hard cookie thing. That's why the crumble thing I don't get.
So the cookie cakes must be a Gentile thing.
It is. It is. We grew up on something called Schnecken.
See, I have no idea what that is.
You know,
is that when you're kissing your girlfriend?
Yeah, that is. Do you know what rugula is?
No. Arugula? Is in like
the lettuce?
Yeah.
No.
No, I don't know what arugula
You've
is.
seen rugula. We've had some here. It's like a little dope. It's like a pastry, and it's kind of wrapped. It looks like a little crescent roll.
Okay.
Only there's raspberry filling in it or something like that.
Gotcha.
We grew up on very non-sweet desserts. So
Which is better.
So an apple cake,
Yeah.
a cinnamon roll, but not real sweet, not with icing on it.
It's probably why you still look so good and so vibrant at your age.
Vibrant. he's spry.
You didn't eat sweets like the South.
But now I binge because we didn't have those things. When I went out on my own, I just went off the rails in many ways. But the Lord has brought me back.
Yeah. So the double doozy at Great American Cookie Company is when they 2 cookies, and then they put icing in the middle of it. So a doozy is like a smaller version, like 2 small cookies, and then a double doozy is like 2 big cookies.
So it's the chocolate chip cookie whoopie pie.
Yes.
Okay.
Like that. Yes.
All right.
It will give you a headache afterwards.
Oh, I have a headache right now.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, just in the description.
But Lindsay's always trying to get me to buy the smaller one or share the bigger one. And I don't want to do either of those things. So the double doozy is.
I've been good. I've avoided almost all of the Christmas cookies that have come here. I went no sugar for the last 300 days, with the exception of my daily Belvita breakfast cookie, which is a complete lie. Yeah. Because it's sold in the cookie aisle.
Yes.
And it's not for breakfast. It has 10 grams of sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, other than that, I'm not eating a lot of pie and cookies and cakes and stuff.
Good for you.
No. And do you ask me how much weight I've lost. Go ahead, ask.
How much have you lost?
0.
Yeah.
0. So I'm miserable. I've lost no weight.
Well, you are working out a lot.
Well, hopefully that has countered that.
It's at least shifted around.
Yeah, it's like my one of my favorite comedians, Tom Papa, who talks about his friends that go on this no bread diet.
Oh yeah,
low carb, and they lose like 3 pounds and nobody notices.
Yeah,
and he goes, and they don't eat bread. They don't eat bread.
So it's not worth it.
No, absolutely not. Okay, just came out of Hope for Christmas. Wow. Incredible. Over 2,000 kids sponsored through the generosity of the people of Revolution Church. Yep. The event was incredible. I say this after all of our events. That's the best thing we've ever done. But that was the best thing we've ever done.
I think this is, you can say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so well organized, and kudos to Lindsay Gertis.
Yeah. Lindsay, obviously, that's just her gifting, and that's why we work well together. And then our team, it was, incredible. those Give a Kid a Chance and Hope for Christmas are just great events because of their focus is to bless our community. But what I love about it is, and why we do them, is twofold. One, because it mobilizes our people to live life on mission, and then it has an impact in the community. And so, last year we sponsored 1,200 kids, and then this year was 2,000.
Wow.
So it was a big leap for us, which it's not just about more kids. Like we need more people to sponsor kids. Exponentially, everything grows. You need more space, more people, more, so both campuses, and it was just incredible. In fact, I was in Canton first and then went to Jasper, and I got to Jasper right at the end. And I fully expected once I got there for things to be shutting down because, you get to that last group of families coming through, we try to start, but when I got there, that place was popping. I mean, it was still so many people, so many families. And that was the part that was probably the coolest. Lindsay told me this was our highest percentage show rate that we've had.
Yes, at least 90%.
Yes, because people, if you don't know, people register for the event. That's how we get their information. And then we send them a lot of communication about the times to show up. So they have to show up, obviously. And so we know, who's coming.
And life happens.
Yeah, life happens. And like always after the event, like this week, there's 40-something families, I think, that still have to come and get gifts and food boxes. But yeah, this year, and it rained both places. And so we were so worried about, you don't do an event because a lot of it happens outside at both campuses. But yeah, miraculously, even with the rain, we had the highest show rate ever, percentage wise. People that registered showed up, and we had a lot of guests come as well. So it was just an incredible, incredible event. Again, we don't do events for events' sakes, but because I don't like events.
Right.
But to have so many people, so many team members, so all of you that are part of our church that served, thank you. All of our outreach partners that were here that served, and just the community. It gives us such an opportunity to let families know, hey, we're here. Here's the things we offer. Here's things other people in the community offer. And so I feel like every time we do it, it just kind of anchors us more into the community.
Yep.
And lets families and our schools, because we work through our school systems, to know, hey, we're here and we care about you.
Our prayer team was jammed up all day, and we have all of the prayer requests now on a prayer list, and our prayer team is praying for those prayer requests. It was really cool. There were just so many divine moments. One of the coolest things, because we had more team members than we've ever had.
Yeah.
So our team members rock, our team leaders rock. At the end of the day, after transforming, obviously last week we transformed the church into Hope for Christmas.
Yeah.
And then in a span of an hour and a half, the church had to be transformed back so we could have gatherings on Sunday. So after moving all the chairs back in and taking all of the pipe and drape down and cleaning up everything and taking the inflatables down, everything was all packed away. There were 50, 60 team members just hanging out in the auditorium, having fun talking.
Yeah, no, there was. And at the end, if those of you still around, and I thought it was great. Like you were talking, Lindsay talked, Jason Woodward talked here in Canton. And I don't know about who talked in Jasper or what happened, but because I was back here in Canton at that point in time. Yeah, people were just hanging around and talking, and y'all were talking, but I kept thinking, will y'all stop talking so I can go home?
But nobody really wanted to leave, and that was one of the coolest things that we get to do this.
Yeah, it was. You're right. Like, and that was, but I was just laughing to myself because people were just hanging out and having fun, and that was great. But it wasn't so much that I wanted to leave, but it was like that was the first time I'd kind of sat down, for the day. And then just the longer I sat there, I was about to fall asleep.
Yeah. Once you sit down, you're done.
Yeah. So it's like once you get to that level, because this was what 4 or 5 o'clock?
Oh, it's 5:30. Yeah. And you were the only one in the room that actually was going to preach the next day.
Yeah.
So
well, that's what I was thinking. I was like, if I don't get horizontal very fast, then, but I will say this, moving all the chairs, because, we moved the chairs Thursday night after the gathering, move the chairs back Saturday. And even in Jasper, I was helping move some of the chairs. I don't know how the women of our church are not all bald and have hair still, because the amount of women's hair that is on those chairs is crazy.
It's almost like the chairs are like Velcro.
Yes. And I know, obviously I have a wife and a daughter, and their hair always in the shower drain and that kind of stuff. But it was mostly dudes carrying rolling the chairs back and forth. And all of us, like every stack we would pick up, we were like, I don't know how women still have hair on their head, because there was so much hair.
The reason the lights are dim in the auditorium is so you don't see, the condition of the chairs.
And we do clean.
We
clean our auditoriums and, our buildings every week. And so it's not like that stuff is on there for years, Anyway, as a side note. But
that is funny. You were right in the middle of a weekend where you were preaching a phenomenal, a really good message. I've heard it both ways.
Yeah.
Great message out of Ephesians 3 leading up to the Christmas message. Is this known as the Great Manifold Message?
I think it will be now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That again, and it's funny. We were actually talking about this in my small group on Monday night. And Lindsay and I, and in our small groups, we go over the messages and go over the sermon, the text. And several of them had said in our group that, they've read Ephesians before. They've read it many times because it is a pretty popular letter. But they just felt like this time it was hitting them differently. And this time there was things that they just didn't see before or understand before.
Right.
And going through it was just and like one of them said, I'll never see this letter the same again, after reading it. And I made the comment, obviously, because was the one preaching the message, which is always fun in a small group, but I said, oh, me too. Like Ephesians is one of my favorite letters. It's Ephesians 5:1 was the very first verse I ever memorized. And so I love it. But I made the comment, I said, but that's why I love preaching, especially through books like this, because it forces me to slow down. Because how many times we just read something,
right,
and we're not really digging in, we're not slowing down and digging into the words. And so we were talking about that idea of manifold. And I was telling them, like, just in studying it, I know manifolds, you know what I mean? Like I know the word, and you just see that and you're like, oh, the manifold wisdom of God. You're like, oh, that's nice, But then when you start thinking about the word and then breaking it down, it's like, oh, many folds. Oh, and that's when I was studying it last week. It was like, oh, folds, and that's when the paper idea came out.
You had a prop.
Yeah, I did. Which the funny thing is, in between Thursday and Sunday, my prop got lost. Because in backstage in Canton, we have a little office back there, but it's a multi-use space, So Santa Claus was back there on Saturday during Hope for Christmas. So sometime in between Saturday, I had made before our gathering Thursday night, I had made that piece of paper, folded it all up and used it. And then I got here on Sunday morning and we went run through like we always do. And about 9:15, 15 minutes before the gathering start, I'm looking, there's my Bible. Oh, where's my piece of paper? Well, somebody threw away my piece of paper.
We found out who it was, probably. We think it was Santa Claus.
Probably. And
because Santa Claus was back there.
Yeah.
At Hope for Christmas.
Yeah.
We're not blaming you, Santa.
No. I mean, he probably, or somebody just probably cleaned up back there. And they just saw a folded up piece of paper.
Sure.
And I was like, that's not just a piece of paper. That's the manifold wisdom of God that you're throwing away.
He may have thought it was your wish list.
Yeah, he might have. Like I needed a manifold for my truck or something. So Sunday morning I was scrambling. So I had to go back over to our office. But I wound up getting a bigger piece of paper. So in the sovereignty of God, I guess it was better. And folding it up. Which I thought, for the camera made it better. But that's what I loved about, again, like I said, preaching through books and then focusing on it. Cause then Like that analogy to me, I'd never thought of that analogy before. Like the idea that God has folded up all of human history before he started, before he made the world, and now he's just unfolding it,
Mm-hmm.
And every time, a new part gets unfolded, that's God just making known what was folded up, or him unfolding what was folded up, which again, I think really helps you understand how your Old Testament and New Testament fits together and why we can't just disconnect ourselves from the Old
Mm-hmm.
Testament. We need to know that story. We need to know, because that's our story,
Right.
And if you think about it, and I know we'll talk a little bit about this, and we've been talking about over the last several weeks, Israel, ethnic Israel, spiritual Israel. And I was thinking about this the other day, God didn't make the world, and he didn't come to make two different religions like Judaism and Christianity. Although they're treated today like they're two different religions. And obviously from a practice standpoint, from just a sheer practical standpoint, they are. But I was thinking about it, that's not what God came to do, though. Like Christianity is the fulfillment of everything that God promised. And so it's not like saying Judaism is incomplete and Christianity is complete. But if you see them from a perspective of that, they're all a part of this one unfolding plan.
Yeah, that's why and well-meaning people have said, "Oh, you're a completed Jew." And, well, no, yes,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that.
No.
I would say that this was one plan that God had.
Yes.
And I was able to see by the power of the Holy Spirit that Jesus is Messiah.
Yes. Well, and I think, and it's really amazing when you think about it. And again, we've talked about this in those last podcasts, but the whole point that the Bible is trying to make in this unfolding plan is what Paul says in Romans 9, 10, and 11. And it also says in Galatians 3, that the children of Abraham are those who have the faith of Abraham, not just the flesh of Abraham. So you're a child of Abraham, not because you're ethnically the same line of him, to where I am not, but ultimately you're a child of Abraham now because you have the same faith he has. And that's the point. And that's kind of what I mean. Again, there are still ethnically Jewish people, but that's the differentiating thing to think about is there's ethnic Israel and there's spiritual Israel. And the point was always have the faith of Abraham. So if you think about it from that perspective, like, just how procreation happens, man and woman coming together in their flesh to make a child. Well, in the same way, God doesn't want us to just pass on our flesh. He wants us to pass on our faith. And that's the whole point. And so when you see it from that perspective, that's what to me, which again, it's not like we planned that. It's not like we planned to have the conversations that we've just had about Israel and the church. And then I preach Ephesians 3 about this unfolding wisdom of God. I just felt like that was the best and most amazing analogy to kind of sum up everything we've talked about on this podcast.
Yeah.
That it's always been one unfolding plan.
Amazing.
And the cool thing to me now is how he says through the church, he is making this known, but now to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly places. So the church, our local church, and every local church, we have to do our part to unfold our piece of that plan. Our part to unfold the story of Jesus, and it's working its way out as faith in people's lives. That's just amazing to me.
Well, it was a great message. It was a great prop. Not my favorite prop of all time. My favorite prop was Easter 2016, the door frame.
The door frame. Yeah, that was good.
The door. Yeah.
Yeah. That was amazing.
Yeah. That was one of those you elbow the person next to you and go, oh, that's good.
The Passover. Yeah. The blood on the doorpost.
Yep. Anything else from the message you want to share?
Well, one thing I did want to share, what I just kind of referenced it to, it actually goes back to our podcast last week, or last time, whenever
It's a
that was.
callback.
It's a callback, yeah. Was, again, this amazing thing where Jesus said, or Paul says in Ephesians 3, that through the church, he's making known the manifold wisdom of God to the rulers and authorities. And so I talked about how now through the church, we are in this spiritual battle, and we'll get into it in Ephesians 6. We don't fight against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers in the heavenly places.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's amazing to me is now through the church, the Holy Spirit is rescuing people that are enslaved to sin. And I talked about the first heaven, second heaven, third heaven, that idea, and how Jesus said in Matthew chapter 16, he was going to build his church and the gates of hell can't stop it. So now through the church, in the name of Jesus and the power of the Holy Spirit, the church can walk into Satan's kingdom and steal back God's people.
Mm-hmm.
And Satan can't do a thing about it. And the callback to last podcast was when we were talking about at the end why I think we're in the millennial reign of Christ now and the tribulation. We were talking about the strong man, and you asked me a question about if Satan was a strong man, and I it's not that I said something wrong,
right,
but I didn't say it clearly. To your point, yes, what Jesus was talking about in Mark 6 and Luke 11, where he talks about the strong man, was in the context of people were saying Jesus was actually an evil spirit. Like he was from Beelzebub or the devil. And Jesus's point was, how can the devil throw out the devil? How a house divided against itself can't stand. And then he says, a strong man, has a house and he's guarding it. Well, someone first has to come in and bind the strong man, so then you can plunder the house. What I was saying was that Jesus is the stronger man.
Yes.
But to your point, yes, Satan is the strong man in that story. So I want to clarify that if you were listening to last week's podcast, like I misspoke in that to say, yes, Satan is the strong man. But now, because Jesus died and rose again, he's bound Satan. He has bound the strong man. And now if you think about that in terms of this week's message, we now have the power to go into the kingdom of darkness and rob or plunder the people of God because the strong man's been bound. He can't do anything about it. And that's what Jesus was saying there, in which I was trying to relate to that's what I think why we're in this millennial reign of Christ. We're in the reign of Christ right now. Satan does not have power over people. Now, he's still powerful. He still deceives the nation. Yes, he's still doing those things. But now, in the name of Jesus, because Jesus has bound him, Satan can't stop the church from taking back the people of God.
So we don't have to pray for to bind the strong man. The strong man's already been bound.
He's been bound.
Okay.
Yes. And that's where you were asking the question.
Yep.
And again, some different kind of strands of Christianity will say we need to pray to bind the strong man. I wouldn't say that we need to pray to bind the strong man because Jesus has already bound him. I would say help us to operate in faith that he is bound.
Yes.
Give, as Paul said, give me boldness. That's why he said we have boldness because we have access now.
That's right.
So we can go forward in boldness, no matter how dark this world gets. Again, if we're in the tribulation, I think we are. If we're in the millennial reign of Christ, I think we are. We can move forward knowing that the strong man's been bound, that Satan and his demons and his legion, group, does not have power over Jesus and the church because the Holy Spirit is greater than those evil spirits. And that's why I think, yes, the statement I was trying to make and what you just asked, Satan is bound now because when Jesus walked the earth, demons were subject to him. And when Jesus sent out the 72, as we referenced, demons were subject to the apostles, So yes, the strong man has been bound. And that was the point Jesus was trying to make. He was like, how can I be from Satan if I've bound Satan?
Sure.
You know? No, he's like, I'm from the Father.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I have the power to bind him. Now, through the church, we can go in and plunder in the name of Jesus. And by plunder, I mean get people.
Yep. Excellent. Excellent. Last podcast of the year. So we're in the middle of Hanukkah right now. We record this on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
And Hanukkah runs until the 15th, which I think is Friday.
Okay.
And of course, Christmas. We have our Christmas gatherings starting a week from tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which would be Thursday night in Canton, and then Saturday night in Canton, and then Sunday in both locations.
Yeah.
Almost regular hours on Sunday.
We adjust it a little bit.
Yeah. So 9:30 and 11:30 on Sunday. Invite somebody. If you haven't been to our app, if you haven't been to our website, there's a QR code that you can actually make your home screen.
Yes, which you have. You
Yes. Yeah. Lead by example right there.
Yeah. Well, the camera's over there.
Okay, right over here.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
If you're watching.
I'm showing you.
Yeah.
I did pull it out yesterday at a place that you enjoy for their wings. And I was in
Wingstop?
That's what I didn't want to say it, but
okay.
yeah, that was the
No,
place.
praise Jesus. We just got one in Canton.
Yeah. I took out a loan and went to Wingstop. What happened to wings?
Oh, apparently through the pandemic, like, I don't know, either COVID hit the chickens hard or I don't know, inflation, man, like eggs and chicken. Whew.
Yeah. There was this great family at the next booth, and I just admired how they were talking to their daughter and how they were encouraging her. So afterwards, I said, "Hey, excuse me, I don't want to bother you. You going to finish those wings?" No, I said, I just want to encourage you. You guys are doing great. Keep doing what you're doing with your daughter. It was really neat to see. And the lady starts crying, and I leave, and it's like one of those moments, like, oh, what an opportunity. So I come back. I do the walk of shame back into Wingstop, and I pull out my phone. I pull up the QR code.
Yeah.
And I said, "Hey, do you guys have a church you go to?"
Yeah.
And they said they do have a church.
Okay.
I said, "Well, I do want to invite you to our Christmas gatherings."
Yeah.
So
Well, good for you, man. That's awesome.
there you go. Hanukkah is ending Friday, Festival of Lights.
So for our or for our Great American Cookie Company side of the family, why don't you explain what Hanukkah, by that I mean the Gentiles, why don't you explain to the family people that may not know?
Well, let's go back 2,300 years. It was 2,300 years ago.
Yeah.
And contrary to what the Vice President of the United States' husband posted on Twitter this week, which was not the story of Hanukkah. Now, the second gentleman, that's what he's called. The second gentleman is Jewish.
Yes.
But he told a story of Hanukkah that was unfamiliar to any other Jewish person on the planet.
Yeah. I'm familiar to the definition of Hanukkah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was 2,300 years ago, another season of great oppression and persecution of the Jewish people. And this time it was the Syrians and the Greeks. So there was a king named Antiochus, and he was leading this oppression of the Jewish people and was killing them and destroying the temples. So the insurrection of just a handful of Jewish people was led by a guy named Judah Maccabee. They called him the Hammer.
Yeah.
And he came in.
What a name.
Yeah. Great name. He came in with a band of ragtag guys who were not going to take no for an answer.
Yeah.
And defeated the Syrian army and took back the temple. So they get back to the temple and they find that the temple had been so desecrated. And when I say desecrated, not only physically, but spiritually.
Yeah.
So they had, the Syrians knew that the Jewish people would not take kindly to pigs in the sanctuary.
Yeah.
Because pigs were not kosher. They were not clean. They actually slaughtered pigs. And the blood of the pigs were on the bema, on the podium, on the mercy seat, quote unquote, of the synagogue. And so they came in and they saw all this destruction. There is an everlasting lamp in every synagogue. When you go into a synagogue today, you go to one in Roswell, there is a light above the podium.
Okay.
And it would be usually above the ark where the Torah is held.
Yeah.
And the light is supposed to represent God's light.
Hmm.
So it's supposed to be everlasting.
Yeah.
Well, they only had oil. They didn't have, smart bulbs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And in the destruction of the temple, they found a jar of oil, and there was only enough oil for one night.
Yeah.
So they put the oil in the lamp, they lit the lamp, and the miracle is that this oil lasted 8 days and 8
days.
nights.
Yeah.
So y'all listening probably only know Hanukkah through Adam Sandler. And-
a lot of people. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but the story doesn't end there. What is incredible, and in John 10, you see this because Jesus walks through the portico,
Hmm.
and it would have been the season of Hanukkah. He would have been there for the festival of dedication.
Yeah.
And I think I preached about this one time, that as Jesus is walking through the portico at the festival of dedication, which would have been Hanukkah, the festival of lights,
Yeah.
here comes the light of the world.
Mhm.
Okay, so the light of the world
Mhm.
is coming in during the festival of
Of
lights.
lights,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, it gets
Irony much?
it gets so much better.
Yeah.
You've seen a menorah.
Hmm.
Okay, the Hanukkah menorah has how many candles?
Nine. Yes.
9. Has 9 candles, 4 on each side, and then there is one candle in the middle.
Yeah.
That candle is called the Shamas. That candle is used to light all the other candles.
Mm.
So on the first night of Hanukkah, my true love gave to me. On the first night of Hanukkah,
Yeah.
you would light the Shamas,
Hmm.
and then the Shamas would light the first candle, and you would sing Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Mechalam Asher Kachanu V'Mitzvosav V'Tivanu L'Chadlik Ner Shel Hanukkah. So that would be the first prayer, and then you would celebrate each day, and the Shamas would light all the candles. Do you know what Shamas means? Shamas means servant.
I did not know that.
So the Shamas is the servant candle
Mm.
that lights all the other candles.
Wow.
So the meaning behind Hanukkah and why Christians need to know these festivals and feasts,
Yeah.
not necessarily to celebrate them, and you can. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that, but to understand Jesus in every single thing. Now you're not going to see Hanukkah in the Bible.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say, because that wasn't one of the ones God initially prescribed them to.
Right. It would be in the Talmud,
Yeah.
which is the owner's manual
Yeah.
for Jewish people.
It's the rabbinical tradition.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So if you are Jewish, you would follow the Talmud
Mhm.
as to this is what you do, this is when you do it. So in the Talmud, in the book of Shabbos, in one other book, there is the description of what I just talked about.
Yeah.
How the Maccabees fought against the Syrian Greeks, defeated the Syrian Greeks, went back into the temple. The oil lasted 8 days and 8 nights, and you are to commemorate that in a feast of dedication.
Yeah.
So to see Jesus in Hanukkah
Yeah.
is incredible, because growing up, I mean, I have bad flashbacks about most of my childhood.
Yeah. As a lot of us do. Yeah.
And I remember vividly 6 years old, Hanukkah when we were 6. And believe me, we never got to the 8th candle.
Mm.
We were lazy.
Yeah.
We would do like 3 nights and then, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But the first night of Hanukkah, you would get your like really special gift.
Yeah.
And I remember on the first night of Hanukkah, my brother got an NBA basketball,
Mm.
like an indoor one.
Mm.
Back then,
Nice.
you get
Yeah.
an indoor. I was like, that is amazing. I wonder what I'm getting.
Yeah.
I hope it's the Hot Wheels Supercharger set. and it was a watch.
Mm.
It was a Timex watch. I was 6.
Yeah.
I was, and it was a simple time. It was 1967.
Yeah.
I didn't have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
I didn't have a calendar. I didn't have
Yeah.
Google Calendar. I
You
didn't have
didn't really
calendar.
need a watch.
No, I had one friend. His name was Steve Cornish. He lived like 3 doors down.
Yeah.
If we were going to do something together, we would just go knock on each other's door. And
Yeah.
I wasn't like, oh, it's 4:00. I got to go see Steve. and I was very disappointed, very ungrateful for my watch,
Yeah.
of which I still have horror flashbacks to.
Yeah.
I have since repented of my ungratefulness to my parents. I wish I still had that watch.
Yeah, of course.
But, when you're 6, I mean, that was back, there were only like 10 teams in each league in baseball.
Yeah.
It was before division play.
Yeah.
It was a simple time.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are we talking? Oh, Hanukkah. Yeah. Hanukkah.
You got sidetracked on your. That was a rabbit hole for you.
Yeah.
But no, what's amazing about that is, and I didn't think about it until you just were describing it. A, because I didn't know that about the center candle, but B, even though that was a tradition or that was a festival that God didn't command them to do, even though that God was still involved in that. Like obviously God was involved in the miracle of that happening. And then even them celebrating it. So it's like, even though God didn't command it in his words, he was involved in it. And even in that, it points to Jesus.
Yeah.
Even in that. So even like not only through his word is he pointing to Jesus, but he wants to point to Jesus through the experiences in your life. Is kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like, and now this festival that Jewish people celebrate, it's still pointing to Christ, even though it came out of a personal experience from some people. So that was just cool to me. Like the celebration of that, it's not like God commanded them to do it.
Right.
But even in their experience, he was still using it to point to Jesus.
Jesus is the servant candle.
Yeah.
He came to serve, not be served.
Yeah.
And he is the light of the
He
world.
is the light that lights everybody.
Incredible. And I remember, and just going back to what you said about going through the letter of Ephesians.
Yeah.
And when we read something, we can gloss over things, we can miss things. And we're going through John. It took us 2.5 years to get through John. We're in John 10, and it happened to be the weekend that I was preaching, and I'm reading John 10, and I'm going, okay, Jesus comes in, walks through the portico, the colonnade, and it's the Feast of Dedication. And, I wonder what that is.
Yeah.
I wonder what that means. Hanukkah. Hello.
Yeah.
and all of these connections started to happen.
Yeah.
Going back to 6 years old, my first recollection of Hanukkah in our house. And my dad would make such a big deal about the Shamas, but he didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
So really
didn't
cool.
know the symbolism of it.
Really cool stuff.
Yeah.
So just know that Hanukkah is not a Jewish copy of Christmas.
Yeah.
Because of assimilation into culture, it has become that Hanukkah thing where, people have lights on at their house and they buy gifts, and you can go into TJ Maxx and get all kinds of what is called Judaica. Whenever you see things with the Star of David on it or Hebrew scriptures on it, that would be called Judaica. So when we went to Israel and we were buying all those things, like people were buying menorahs and they were buying mezuzahs for their house. That would be called Judaica. So you can still get that kind of stuff right next to the Christmas section.
Gotcha.
But it's celebrated on the 25th day in the Hebrew calendar of what we would call the month of December.
Okay.
It just happens to be around Christmas. That's why Hanukkah always fluctuates. There is,
but it's on the 25th day.
It's on the 25th day
the same way
in the Hebrew calendar.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and it's never the same in the Gregorian calendar. So there isn't one Jewish person on the planet that actually knows when Hanukkah is each year.
Yeah.
even the rabbis are like, when's Hanukkah?
Yeah.
End of November. You kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's true.
Yeah, it's kind of like Easter for us.
You just never know.
When's Easter?
Yeah.
Yeah. But here we are in Christmas. And when we were in Israel, I think it was the second time. So you were on the last Israel trip, 2019.
That was, which was your third time.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was the second time that we had our mind blown. And then the third time, again, just fully understanding what really happened and where was Jesus born and why do we think that he was born here and not here?
Yeah.
So lots of context to get into as we close out the year talking about Christmas. There is a place between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. Now, if you're on the outskirts of Jerusalem, let's say you're thinking about the outskirts of Canton, and you're looking toward Jasper, about halfway up 515 would be Bethlehem.
Yeah.
You can see Bethlehem from Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So the hill,
Bethlehem is elevated. I mean, Jerusalem is elevated.
Jerusalem is elevated.
Yeah.
And Bethlehem is down more in a valley, but
in the south.
But you can actually see Bethlehem.
Yeah. It'd almost be like Jasper elevated up looking
Yes.
down at Canton.
Yes, excellent,
Yeah,
excellent,
that one.
and but not as far.
Yeah,
It's
but not as far.
It's not 24 miles. It's
Yeah.
probably 10 miles
Yeah.
to Bethlehem. And as you're looking from Jerusalem to Bethlehem or Bethlehem to Jerusalem, there is an expanse of land,
Yeah.
rocky land, like boulders,
Mhm.
boulders, grasses, occasional trees, and it's a pretty big expanse of land.
Yeah.
Those would be the shepherd's fields.
hmm
And we believe that Jesus was born in the shepherd's fields because
Just outside of Bethlehem.
so not at where the church is in Bethlehem.
No.
You didn't get to go to Bethlehem.
No, because
didn't-
it's primarily a Islamic city now.
It
right?
is.
Yeah.
It is. It's
Part
Palestinian.
of the West Bank.
Palestinian run.
Yeah.
And it was one of the weirder things. The first time we went to Bethlehem, after we went to Bethlehem the first time, I told the tour company,
hmm
we're not coming back if we have to go to Bethlehem.
Yeah.
So a lot of things when you go on,
Because your Jewish guides aren't allowed in.
the Jewish guides are not allowed in.
Yeah.
Jewish people are not allowed,
Not allowed in. Yeah.
So we stop at a checkpoint, and there are checkpoints around Jerusalem, so it's not abnormal. And I see our guide I see Ronnie walking off, and then I see another guy walking on. Now I'm thinking, hey, are we getting hijacked? What is happening?
What just happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he comes in and he takes the microphone. He introduces himself and he says, I will be your guide for your time in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Now we're starting to figure this out. Okay.
Yeah.
So Ronnie was not allowed in.
Which is an ironic thing from all we've just talked about the last couple of podcasts with Israel and the war that's going on. So Palestinians can live in Israel.
Yes.
But Jewish people cannot live in Palestinian areas.
Correct.
Yes. So with it like
Enough said.
Enough said. Yes.
So it's Bethlehem is dirty.
Yeah.
It smells. It's only for tourists.
Yeah.
You go to the Church of the Nativity. I think maybe that's what it's called. I don't
It
remember.
is. Yeah.
And
From what I remember.
and
yes.
and there's an X on a stone.
Yeah.
And they think, okay, that's where Jesus was born.
Yeah.
And people flock to it and they cry and they kiss it. And,
Yeah, of course.
But there is
Which came about when Constantine,
mhm,
the Roman Empire, that's where they said that they think it happened.
right.
So there's way more theological significance to what we're talking about.
Yeah. So the school of thought is that Jesus was born in the shepherd's fields.
Yeah. No. And I didn't know this until you came back and started telling me, and then we went. Because obviously I knew Jesus was born in Bethlehem because the Bible says, prophetically, that is where he was through the Old Testament, that Messiah would be born. And no one disputes that. No one disputes that Jesus was actually born in Bethlehem
Right.
from that perspective. The dispute is exactly where.
Mhm.
Did it happen in town? Like in the modern thought was like there was no room for them in the inn. So then they were like back behind the inn, where the animals were. And so that was where the modern thought is, born in a manger. But the Bible doesn't tell us that there were animals there. It just says it was a manger.
Mhm.
Which, and again, I didn't realize either until we went, but it wasn't wooden.
No.
It was made out of stone.
Yeah.
So
And
all the mangers that we see that are wooden are wrong. So if you have a manger in your front yard, tear it down.
And
It's a joke. It's a joke.
no,
But
that became something from Europe.
from Europe, because their primarily building material was wood. So it was kind of like a reinterpretation of the manger in wood.
Mhm.
But no, everything in Israel is stone.
Yeah.
Which our guy pointed out, how amazing is that God, worked through that area, through obviously the Jewish people, to preserve things. Because the fact that the temple was built out of stone and not wood, that's still there, or the
Mhm.
base of it is still there. So the idea that he was born in a manger, would have been more like a cave, more like something built out of a rock.
Right.
Which is where there's a cave there, and that's why they think that that's where he was born. But more than likely, he was actually born out in the shepherd's fields. And again, like you said, because we know there were shepherds nearby,
Mhm.
and there was a place out in those shepherds' fields where there's a tower made out of stone.
Migdal Eder.
Yeah, is that how you say it?
Migdal Eder.
Yeah, I wasn't even going to try.
Yeah,
You
well,
know?
it was funny. You know, I asked Leanna last night as we were thinking about what we were talking about. I said, "Hey, when we were at Shepherd's Fields," and she goes, "Oh, Migdal ate her," and
Yeah.
she just tells the whole story
Yeah.
because it is fascinating. For Passover,
Yeah.
they would raise 250,000 lambs
Yeah.
for the sacrifice at Passover, and that's how we know that the population of Jerusalem goes from about 80,000 to 2.5 million.
Yeah.
80,000 to 2.5, and the old city of Jerusalem was not very big.
No, it's not.
So what are there? There's 289,000 people in Cherokee County, and all of a sudden it becomes 4 million people.
Yeah, exactly.
so
Yeah.
so it fills up pretty quick. We know that a lamb would feed about 8 to 10 people.
Mhm.
So that's how we know 2.5 million people would come for the Passover. But the Passover lamb had to be raised blameless, spotless. There was only one place that spotless lambs were raised, and it was in these shepherds' fields.
Yeah.
Under the watch of the Tower of Migdal Eder, which is the Tower of the Flock.
Yes.
So the school of thought is that Jesus would have been born here as the sinless, spotless lamb.
Yeah.
The only place where spotless lambs were raised. And the whole notion that Mary would have been knocking on doors with Joseph, hey, I need a place to birth this baby,
Mm-hmm.
Was probably not going to happen in a Jewish culture
Mm-hmm.
because there would have been uncleanliness
Yes.
in the birth of a child.
Yeah.
So that would not have happened
Yeah.
in somebody's home
They wouldn't have just welcomed them in.
or in somebody's barn.
Yeah.
So that's the story that kind of blew our minds in Israel.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And again, I didn't know that. I mean, again, going back to that message from Passover and Easter, Jesus is everything that happened in the Old Testament is symbolic or a shadow. It was real. It really happened, but it was pointing forward to something. So even how you paint the blood on the doorpost,
Mhm.
you know, how God told the Jewish people to do that in Egypt at the top and the two sides and the bottom, which was pointing where the cross would line up, you know? And so that was always pointing forward to Jesus. And now you get this shadow
Mhm.
that we didn't know in the shepherd's fields, that it's significant that not only Jesus was born in Bethlehem from the David perspective, from King David's perspective, but also because it was a shadow saying Jesus is the true Passover lamb. Just like the other Passover lambs had to be spotless. And in the bottom of this tower was an area where these lambs would be born.
Mhm.
And that was like a manger. And so more than likely that's where Jesus was born, in this kind of, it was a bottom of a tower made out of stone, you know, and that's where.
Think of like a stall made out of stone.
Yeah. Almost like a lighthouse. If you
Yes.
think about a lighthouse, at the bottom of it, you know, it's hollowed out, you know, and that's what this tower would kind of look like. And so in the bottom, there'd be an opening, and you could come in, and that's where the shepherds would lead those sheep to give birth. And so that's where more than likely, Mary gave birth to Jesus, who is the true Passover lamb. He's the only person that was born spotless and sinless. So from his birth, God was signifying this is the Passover lamb that's going to be the sacrifice in a way that all these other lambs that come from here can't. And so again, those lambs were a shadow pointing forward to Jesus, that he was our true Passover lamb. He was our true sacrifice.
Our guide told us that those 250,000 sacrificial lambs would be brought into the walls of the city, taken up to the Temple Mount, and slaughtered in the Holy of Holies. And the blood would be so great that it would pour out down the steps of the Holy of Holies, down from the Temple Mount to the temple platform, and the platform would be ankle deep in blood. And then Jesus comes, and no longer does there need to be an animal sacrifice. His blood is sufficient.
Exactly.
Amen.
So it's significant that he was born not only in Bethlehem, but in these fields, because it's not just that God was saying, yes, this is the king that I promised that was going to be like King David, but this is the sacrificial lamb who was born in these same places, in these fields where shepherds were, saying that he's the sacrificial lamb and he's the shepherd, So there's all this amazing shadow symbolism there. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were talking this morning over at the office about all of the other historical significances of Christmas and the traditions and the notion that it probably wasn't in December.
Yeah.
And I thought you had a really good perspective on that.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. Most theologians would say Jesus wasn't actually born on December 25th. And again, during the time of Constantine, there was a lot of things that were kind of formalized from a Christian perspective when the Catholic Church was created, and places like this were identified, the Church of the Nativity and all these kind of things. Because Constantine, who is a believer now, wanted to, he baptized the Holy Roman Empire, and so there's a lot of places now historically that we have or that we know about because of that. But then there's some disputes on things like this, where those actually the paces, because that was 4 centuries later,
right.
So we don't know. But sometimes that's used kind of as a gotcha moment, where unbelievers will say, well, Jesus wasn't actually born on December 25th, right? Well, he may not have been. A lot of theologians think he was born in the spring or in the fall, and there's reasons around that. But my point was, like, it doesn't really matter the exact day he was born.
Right.
The fact matters is this is the fact he was born. Like, and no one disputes that. He was born. He was a historical figure, and he died, and he rose again. And some of those details, I'm not saying details don't matter. Don't hear me. We just laid out how details matter.
Sure.
But some details don't, because from a historical perspective, we don't need every detail of everything that Jesus ever did in order to believe that he is the Christ, that he is the Messiah. So was he actually born on December 25th? I don't know. More than likely that was a pagan holiday that Christians took because they wanted to celebrate Jesus. And so they chose that day to kind of, like, again, undo the pagan traditions and make a new Christian tradition. And that's fine. I think that's great. And that's a good thing to do. But was he actually born on that day? Probably not. But it doesn't matter. Just like how the Easter date moves, it doesn't matter exactly when it is. It just matters that we celebrate that it happened.
Yes.
That's the point.
Excellent. What are your favorite Christmas traditions? I mean, we're wrapping this year up, and you're going to preach 5 messages.
That's my favorite Christmas tradition.
Preaching
messages.
no, it is. I know you love preaching God's word.
Yeah, Christmas is always I would say, and Lindsay and I, as we get older, we're trying to find ways to celebrate it better. But yeah, for much of my married life and ministry life, Christmas has revolved around church.
Yep.
Because here at Revolution, we do, I will personally preach 5 gatherings. We'll have like 8 to 10, in person and online. The church I was on staff at in Texas before here, we normally did 10 in person. Like, I would be at 10 of them. The pastor there preaches 10, and they have others as well. So yeah, so much of our Christmas tradition has revolved around church. But I don't say that as a negative thing, because Lindsay and I want our kids to know that Christmas is about Jesus. It's not about the gifts per se, although again, that's fine, but it's about Jesus. And what is Jesus about? He's about people. So for us, a Christmas tradition is serving. It is being at the church. It is facilitating. And both of my kids will serve at gatherings. My wife, obviously, I will. So we love that. But then now our biggest tradition is we take off the week after. Even as a church, we take off. And Christmas morning, we will celebrate at our house. We'll go to her family's house. So that's always a big thing. So and normally back in the day, I would preach gatherings at our church in Texas, and then we would finish the last one at like 10 or 11 at night. And then we would get in a car and drive all night long so that we could get to her parents' house Christmas morning.
Wow.
So I don't do this now, thank God, because they live in the same city as us. But I would literally be a part of 10 Christmas gatherings. And then Lindsay and I would we'd be ready and we'd be packed up. And Natalie wasn't born yet. So it was mainly me, Lindsay, and Jackson. And the two of them would sleep. And I'd drive 8 hours across the state of Texas through the night so that we could wake up. And normally
Wow.
we'd have Christmas morning at like 8 or 9 in the morning. And I'd still be awake because I'd been awake all night. And then we'd celebrate that, and then I would go crash. I'd sleep the rest of the day. Thank God now I get to go home, and not drive through the night to celebrate Christmas. But I would say the best way to summarize it is we like to spend our Christmas tradition is spending it with the family of God
Mm-hmm.
and then our personal family.
That's excellent.
And I would
I love
highly
that.
recommend everybody in our church have that same mentality.
Mhm.
Like, make time to spend with your family, including the family of God,
Mm-hmm.
the church, because that's a big part. You want to develop that tradition. We always have gatherings on Christmas Eve. Sometimes those gatherings are just in the morning, like this year, because Christmas Eve is on a Sunday.
Yep.
Sometimes those gatherings are later in Christmas Eve. We try not to go, we won't go past 5:00 because we don't want people here that late with their families, like be at home. But I want to encourage everybody to make being a part of the family of God a part of your Christmas tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Because it sends the message to your kids and to your family, Jesus, this is about Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
and I would even encourage people, and we don't say it this way, but I think it's fine to say it this way, for people to say, hey, we want our best gift this year to be to Jesus.
Mm.
And so a lot of people will think that way, even from a giving perspective. They
Mhm.
want to give to Jesus, give to the church, because it's just a reminder that, hey, Christmas really is about Jesus.
Mhm.
And it's about what Jesus has done, which is to make us his family.
And if you are generous, if you have started your journey of generosity here, if you've been giving for a long time, this would be the time of year where you will get a giving statement.
Yeah.
And it'll come out. Make sure you check it. Make sure it's correct.
Yes, exactly.
Because that'll be for your tax return for 2023. But your year-end gift, you can give up until midnight on December 31st.
Yes, and that day we'll actually have a gathering online. Like I said, we take off the last weekend of the year. And new people to our church sometimes like, why do y'all do that? Again, it's a Sabbath Sunday for us.
Mhm.
We want to be with our families. But this year just so happens the 31st is on a Sunday. So it's kind of cool this year. Christmas Eve is on a Sunday. New Year's Eve is on a Sunday. So we'll record and have a gathering that day. And it's really cool because we get to celebrate some of the highlights of the
Mhm.
year, which is just awesome. So we'll share some of those stories. We'll talk about some of those things. And it's always great just to kind of look back, as we now are about to transition into 2024. But yeah, that's the day you can give. And again, that's just a tax
Mhm.
thing.
And all of the things we're going to talk about in the year-end video, all of the things that we have talked about on the podcast, whether it was Give a Kid a Chance or Hope for Christmas or anything, if you have been coming to church and your mind has been blown and you're seeing Jesus in a way that you've never seen Jesus before, it is because of your generosity.
100%.
All of this is tied to God's generous people. So
Yes.
that's why we give people an opportunity to give.
Yes.
And as a staff, we lead in that. We
Yes.
are all tithers. We are all generous givers, not to inflate anything, just to say, hey, we can't get up on this stage and say give. We can't get up in front of these microphones and say give if we're not.
No, and it's funny. I was just listening to, and I'll probably use some of this in our Abide series that's coming up, but in Hebrews where it talks about look at your leaders and imitate the outcome of their way of life, and also make it a joy for them to serve because it's no benefit to you, which is a great verse. But yeah, part of being in leadership, and we'll get into this in Ephesians 4 next year as well, is God has called some people to be in leadership to equip the saints to do the work of ministry. So therefore, as leaders in the church, we're called to equip people to do something. Well, I can't equip people to do something if I'm not doing it.
Yep.
I don't know how to do it. So how can I tell you how to do it if I'm not doing it?
Mhm.
And we also call that hypocrisy.
Yep.
So yeah, so as leaders in the church, we want to set the example so that people can imitate the outcome of our way of life. And that, yes, that applies to giving as well, but serving. It's like I said this last weekend, like God made us a minister. And so all of us in Christ are ministers. And so we should be following the example of Jesus, which Jesus affirmed tithing. With the Pharisees, said, you tithe, that's great. You should keep doing that. But he said, you should get on to the weightier matters of mercy and love, So that is just one example of a continuation, even though it was an Old Testament command, now it's a New Testament principle that we should set the example in every area, like serving, like giving, like loving.
Yeah.
So.
A lot of folks will ask the question, what are you doing for Christmas? You've already explained what you're doing. We don't know. So when I'm vague and I go, I don't know what we're doing. We have several things that we could be doing on Christmas. We started a new tradition a couple years ago of just going away, the two of us.
Yeah. Which is good.
And it was a blast. We went to Greenville, and then we got there on Christmas evening, left on Christmas morning, and realized everything's closed.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. And it was 17 degrees.
Yeah.
And if you know my wife,
I don't like the cold.
Not 17 degrees.
Yeah.
But we managed to have a great time. So we started that new tradition. And then we have some friends that we absolutely love. Love them dearly. And sometimes we'll spend Christmas there. But our plans are soft until about 15 minutes out.
Which is just wild.
We'll see how we feel when we wake up on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
I will not be the guy buying the ham on the 23rd at Costco.
No.
Because who knows whether we're going to use it or not. But we will have all the staples to bring to people. Whether it's a cake or something like that.
Yeah.
Those last minute invitations. You always have to have a bag of Chex Mix, a brownie mix you can throw in the oven.
Exactly.
Oh, you made brownies. Thanks. Yeah. That's it. That's the last
year
podcast of the year.
We'll come back in January. We'll talk about, again, be prepared, abide, fasting, all those kinds of things. So that's coming. So enjoy Christmas, enjoy the new year, and then we'll be back here in 2024.
If you want a transcript of today's show, just follow it, watch it on YouTube. There is a transcript. We didn't know that until about a couple of months ago. Or you could write down everything we say. Our producer is Brian Damerow. Our video technician, Neon Kian Sadici. Our key grip, I don't know if he's here today, Jakub Pushkakovsky. Our head of doctrine and theology is theologian. Our chief evangelist, salvation. Our backsliding prevention officer is lukewarm. Our director of Swedish witnessing is Bjorn again. Our expert on Russian eschatology is Pitov Hell. Just makes me giggle.
Hell.
Our staff counselor is Les Moody. Our giving coordinator is Generosity. Our nativity coordinator, she's from France. Her name is Bethlehem.
By way of Israel.
Yes. Co-pastors of Plagues, Manny Locust and Lance Boyles. Our Irish eschatology professor is Mark O. the Beast. Our director of communication is Bernie Bush. Our director of doctrine of election is I Am Chosen. Our sabbatical director is Trip Long. Our predestination expert, Grace and Faith. Grace and Faith. Our director of marriage studies from Romania, Shizma Betterhoff. Shizma Betterhoff. Our missional expert is Sam Aria. Our resident Trinitarian is Holly Spirit. The strategist for the final battle is Irma Geddon. And our resident sheep tender.
Oh, sheep tender.
Yes.
From the shepherd's field.
Yes, he only works in December, or whatever month that actually happened. His name is Nathaniel Tivity. Nathaniel Tivity. Nativity. Nativity.
That's how you said Nathaniel instead of Nate. Nativity. Yeah, I like that.
Best advice we could ever give you to end the year?
Trust God and take it out. We'll see you next year.
Bye.